Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m.
America Open Market, AO Market. The best digital market for humanity is a free, multilingual, borderless market open to international sellers with various languages included. With America Open Market, you may start selling in minutes after filling out the form. Comprehensive dashboard where you understand your sales, orders, and customers is available. You get paid directly, securely, and instantly on the America Open Market. You can sell your house, car, electronic laptop, CD player, boombox, phone, headphones, furniture, and clothing, and anything on AmericaOpenMarket.com where all your sales and customer needs are met. Register as a merchant today. You will not regret becoming a vendor at America Open Market. For further inquiries, contact us at aomarket@gmail.com. AO Market, best digital marketplace for humanity. Hello, welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I'm Dustin Pickering, your host, with also CARLO Parcelli, and we have guest host Billy Bob. Today's special guest is Max Perry. He's an independent journalist and geopolitical analyst based in New York City. His writing has appeared widely in alternative media, and he is a frequent political commentator featured in Sputnik News and Press TV. And we're going to be discussing American diplomacy, Marxism, and imperialism and fascism. So let's get ready to go with this, get this riled up, and we'll get started with the show. Nice to see you today, Max. Can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm an independent journalist, currently based in New York. I'm originally from California. I've only been doing journalism for about 4 or 5 years now. My latest work, I'm a critic of American foreign policy, and I generally write big picture type articles that really get into historical questions. And my latest work is I'm exploring the topic of Alexander Dugin and his relation to his supposed influence on the foreign policy decisions made by the Putin administration in Russia. And in the wake of his daughter's assassination in Moscow, there were he's always been a specter looming over geopolitical developments in the new Cold War, but this issue really came to the forefront amid his daughter's assassination, and obviously, of course, the flare-up that's taken place in the last year in Ukraine. And so I just thought it was an important topic to explore, because a lot of people were, even just as his daughter was assassinated, were using the word fascism to describe him, as well as making the claim that he's a very influential figure and plays a huge role in Russia's geopolitical aims. So I just wanted to explore that topic really in depth and get into the bigger questions of the different definitions of fascism, and just explore the validity of those claims. And my article really specifically takes a look at how not only how the Western left misunderstands, or I believe misunderstands, Dugin, but also doesn't really get the historical processes and context in which Dugin's theory, fourth political theory, and Eurasianism developed out of specifically the collapse of the Soviet Union and the crisis that post-Soviet Russia was in, both economically and politically, during the 1990s, that's where he really emerged as a figure. I mean, he was an anti-Soviet dissident before that, but his thought really developed amid the austerity and the Yeltsin era. In order to really understand him, the left, I think, has to dig into that era to really understand him in proper context. But the article goes into, like I said, bigger, deeper questions about the nature of fascism and what it is historically. So, this latest article is kind of a that summary I just gave is kind of an example of what my articles generally tend to do. I tend to do long form journalism. My last article before that was for a publication called Covert Action Magazine, which has actually been around since the 70s. It was started by a bunch of former people in the intelligence community who were
Philip Agee and Lou
yes.
Wolf.
Yeah, so
Dirty Works.
Yeah, great resource. And so I'm hoping that this next article will get published there as well. I think I've got a little thing going there with them. Before that, you'll find most of my work in places like Center for Research on Globalization. I was published for a while in the UNS Review with Ron UNS. I got a lot of criticism for that because it is mostly a very conservative website, but I'm not interested in just preaching to the choir. I consider myself on the left politically, and but I'm not into I'm not an elitist. I believe in engaging with people across the political spectrum, and so I'm not ashamed to say I was a lot of my articles were in the UNS Review, but they've been picked up in other places like Mint Press and a few other places. So if people are generally familiar with the sphere of alt indie media, they may have seen my stuff around. It doesn't get published every day though, because that's I tend to do really long form articles. So so that's what I'm working on right now. But that's generally the kind of thing I get into. I usually take a current event and then use that as an opportunity to explore historical events and bigger philosophical questions and political questions, like what is imperialism, what is fascism, what are the different definitions. And this latest development with Dugin and his daughter's assassination and the war in Ukraine, that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now.
So I've seen your commentary and analysis, I think, on Press TV, and have you been on RT? I'm not sure if you've been on RT, but I know I saw you on Press TV. Okay. Sputnik.
Sputnik, yeah, I get interviewed by them quite regularly, actually. I would love to be on RT, but RT America is no more. So
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to have any opportunity, but I've known many people who've worked for them and have done work for them.
So what is the fourth political theory, and how does the three political theories factor into that? The three dominant political theories. I'm just curious because that would help us kind of define fascism, imperialism. Give us some rough fodder to work with, I think.
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to summarize, but if I had to put it in layman's terms, I mean, basically, Dugin sees the 20th century as like a historical period, where there was a battle of ideas between different political systems of Western liberal capitalism, then fascism, and then also communism. And his theory is basically that those are archaic political systems that are all three of them are not sufficient to our current historical moment or predicament, and that a fourth political theory is needed, which takes elements of those three, not so much liberalism, because he's very anti-liberal. I mean, that's his sort of the central part of his thesis. But basically, he argues that a fourth political theory is needed, and he instead of viewing the world in a Marxist sense, he sees the world as geopolitically as a fight between different essential civilizations. There's Atlanticist civilization, and then there's Eurasianist civilization, and the fourth political theory, he basically argues that that America has tried to, or the West really has tried to export by force its its model of Western liberal democracy, and that its idea of multiculturalism and Western liberal democracy does not apply universally to all civilizations, and that a multipolar world is needed to preserve these different civilizations, instead of having the world dominated by Anglo-American unipolarity, which is what's been going on really since the fall of the USSR. Which is why I try and get into how, in order to understand his ideas, you have to understand how they generated out of the crisis that occurred in the Soviet Union, where this new era of capitalism was ushered in, which imposed massive austerity measures, and the average life expectancy was lowered by an entire decade in Russia, post-Soviet Russia. And this was ushered in by, these former Soviet bureaucrats. Yeltsin was at one time part of the Communist Party. So his ideas emerged out of a crisis where both something like Soviet communism had become bankrupt. But by that same token, Western liberal democracy is not something to uphold, because look at what it did to post-Soviet Russia. It completely deindustrialized the country, decimated its economy. It caused a huge spike in crime and prostitution, and lowered life expectancy. I mean, the neoliberal privatization just it created this whole new class of oligarchs overnight. So his ideas emerged out of this decade where both communism and Western liberal democracy were seen as obsolete, and so that's where he came up. He started to, the Eurasianism and the fourth political theory develop, because he views communism and fascism as they failed to defeat liberalism, and since the fall of the Soviet Union, we've been living in an era where liberalism is the dominant political system. And so he's a traditionalist that's opposed to universalist Western liberalism. He thinks it's destroying cultures around the world. It's very difficult to summarize in briefly, but it's that's sort of the gist of it, I guess. I don't know if that helps, but it's difficult to explain. Basically, he wants to develop a multipolar world that's opposed to Anglo-American unipolarity.
Max, every leftist knows that if you're opposed to liberalism, you're a fascist. So what's your problem? Call him a fascist.
Well, it's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that, because his understanding of, first of all, I approach this actually not knowing very much about Dugin myself, But what was most shocking to me was when I actually sat down to read his work, was that he spends huge amounts of his writing denouncing fascism. And his understanding of fascism is very different from the Western liberal understanding. He also denounces racism up and down. So regardless of what people want to say about his theories, to call him a fascist is really just not on the ball. I mean, of course, there's elements of nationalism, but he actually denounces fascism as a product of modernity.
Well, fascism's actually anti-modernity. It's like you go back to Evola and those thinkers. They're like, and I mean H.P. Lovecraft and those kind of literary figures who were very much opposed to the modern world as we know it.
Yeah, I mean, I think to call him a fascist is really to chase a red herring, because he's more of a traditionalist. He actually, I mean, criticizes fascism not only for being modernist but for being individualist. He actually his understanding, the Western liberal understanding of fascism really, it would have to, its understanding of fascism is really is based on, it criticizes fascism essentially not just for racism, but it really it criticizes it for having a collectivist vision of the nation state. And that's why, thinkers like Hannah Arendt and people like that often equate the Soviet Union as like this twin pillar of Soviet totalitarianism. That's their main criticism of fascism, is that it tried to create this, collectivist nation state. But if that doesn't take into account what fascist states during the Second World War were trying to do, which is that they, Germany and Italy did not have the same amount of colonies that Britain and France had. And so what did they try to do? They tried to conquer parts of the world with populations to, enslave and exploit. Mussolini went into North Africa. The Soviet Union, or the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, was about securing the Lebensraum and conquering the Eurasian heartland that had, which is really what if you could argue the same thing that NATO is trying to do. If that reason filtered into the Western discourse over what fascism is, Western liberalism would have to include its own historical legacy. And so Dugin actually, if you read Dugin, he actually gets that. So there's a lot of overlap in his understanding of what fascism is versus what the liberal understanding of fascism is. I mean, unfortunately, I just watched Ken Burns' The U.S. and the Holocaust documentary series. I mean, and even though it got into how, the American eugenics movement was and segregation laws heavily influenced the Nazis, at no point did he ever explore the connections between colonialism, Western colonialism, and what Nazi Germany was trying to do. So if you read Dugin, he actually has a better understanding of what fascism is than Western liberals do, because he doesn't truncate the expansionism in Nazi Germany, Japan, and Italy from what the legacy of Western colonialism is. It's very much the same thing.
Why do you think so? You mentioned that we stopped shy of discussing the colonial legacies. Why do you think it's something that we have a hard time addressing in our discourse? I mean, is it something because maybe we're still participating in that to a large extent.
Yes, absolutely, and that's very key to understanding, what Dugin's geopolitics, which is that um, the Anglosphere basically has inherited the geostrategic orientation of Nazi Germany with NATO's encirclement of Russia, and that's what's going on. That's what the war in Ukraine, according to Dugin, is all about. And so, but this is where I get into in my article that I dispute the claim that Dugin is, Putin's brain or has any sort of influence on Kremlin policy. Now, obviously, I think that probably Putin is aware of him and may have even read him. I wouldn't doubt it, just having read Putin's own writings himself. But I get into a lot of the history about how, Dugin was one of the co-founders of the National Bolsheviks, which is a party that actually spent many, many years protesting Putin's government, was made illegal by the Putin administration in 2007. Only later on, starting in 2014 with, or I guess you could say earlier, when Putin really started to push back against NATO expansion, only then did some of the conservative ideologues like Dugin, some of their positions on Russian foreign policy start to align with decisions that Putin was making. So there's no real direct connection there. I think it's just really correlation. And a lot of people who were previously critical of Putin, including other people who were involved with the National Bolsheviks, like Edward Limonov, they also supported Putin's decision to recognize the Donbass and things like that. But this idea that he's like this Svengali-like, Rasputin-like figure, influencing executive decisions. I mean, the only link that I could even find is that Dugin was an advisor to somebody that served in the Russian government, but it was at a much lower level. It wasn't anything to do with. I mean, there's no evidence that they've even ever met. So the idea, I mean, I think that he's just a very adept, geostrategist who understands the direction that the world is heading in, and he's making the same assessment that many other scholars have made about the way things would play out if in regard to NATO expansion and Russia. I mean, there's many other scholars that were making that prediction. So although I do dispute his direct influence on the Kremlin, my understanding is, well, even if that's the case, he's not a fascist like many people are claiming. In my view, it's just too simple of an assessment to make. And even though he's not a Marxist, there are many overlaps in his anti-imperialist views, and that by dismissing him as a fascist, Marxists are kind of proving his point that communism or Marxism is outdated and it's obsolete. If we're really going to rise to the challenge, I mean, he's basically putting us on notice, and people should really read his work and engage with it and take it seriously instead of just dismissing it as, because if you actually read it, it's not at all like the way it's characterized. He's not arguing for, Russian expansionism or trying to carve out some new Russian empire. It's all about, he sees, Western values as not universal, and that there are different civilizations that need to be preserved, and that they need to coexist in harmony in a multipolar world. it's the opposite of fascism. I mean, there's no, he doesn't argue for any kind of, expansionism at all. Quite the contrary. So, anyway,
from the liberal point of view, anything that is not, if you're anti-woke, if you're a nationalist, I mean, that's all you need. Those are the ingredients for a fascist. So,
I mean, their definition of fascist now is basically like, if you happen to be somebody that opposes abortion or has any kind of socially conservative views, you're like in the orbit of fascism. So basically, most of the world, according to Western liberals, most people in the world are socially conservative. I mean, this definition of fascism that they're using, it has no. It's just purely based on American, like the culture wars. It has nothing to do with an actual historical understanding, much less, how it's rooted in the crisis of capitalism, or as I actually used in my article to getting into questions of what fascism is. I use R. Palm Dutt, who was the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain during its heyday. He has a book called Fascism and Social Revolution, where he, expands upon Lenin's idea of what fascism is as a logical stage of capitalism when it's in decay. The ruling class mobilizes forces of reactionary forces of violence, to destroy things and get the economy going again. Against progressive forces that are trying to, when capitalism's in a crisis, who want to have a planned economy and things like that, and are mobilizing workers to seize the means of production. So he gets really into how fascism is a natural, a logical step when capitalism is in a crisis and in decay. And that's what happened in Germany and Italy. Sorry, there's an ambulance going by here.
Thought they were coming after you for a second there.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. The FBI's here.
Yeah, we got you. That's all right.
I was going to say, Carlo today he's orbiting right around fascism. If his bandana was actually a hat, he would qualify to most liberals as a fascist. Wearing a red hat these days.
Flag.
Who's that behind you, by the way, Carlo? Who's this gentleman?
That's Lenny Bruce.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he would be canceled he would if they have a problem with Dave Chappelle or any of these comedians. Now, Lenny Bruce, just the racial slurs alone, where he was all about pushing people's buttons and correctness, he would be canceled. He wouldn't last a day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he said basically was murdered by the state.
Yeah,
all that free speech fighting in the '60s on is gone now, practically. Now everybody jumping by his tail about everything they say.
The Irish Catholic police nailed him, killed him.
Yeah, I mean, how ironic was it those when like these people like Steven Crowder or Milo Yiannopoulos or Gavin McInnes, they would, or Jordan Peterson, they do these tours where they speak at U.S. universities, and they're getting like at UC Berkeley, and they're getting protested by the students to leave. I mean, which was the site of the free speech movement.
Mm-hmm. That's my feelings exactly. Yeah, we're going to take a brief break, but we'll be right back with some more thoughts, and you guys enjoy this wonderful commercial. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, if how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Hey, we're back. Thanks for joining us today, everybody out there. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'd love to have you as a subscriber, and we'd love to have you continue to watch the show. Today we have Max Perry. We're discussing fascism, imperialism, and Marxism. So let's go ahead and keep asking questions, whatever, keep the thought-provoking commentary going.
So yesterday I was accused of supporting imperialism when it's not U.S. I support all imperialism except U.S. imperialism. I'm only against U.S. imperialism. So, this liberal approach, this liberal thinking, the thinking that imperialism is, I don't know. I guess when a bigger country is at war with a smaller country, maybe that's the liberal understanding of imperialism. But definitely Russia is imperialist. In their minds, Russia is imperialist, and they're not resisting Western imperialist aggression. They're actually engaged in imperialism, trying to expand their borders in Ukraine, trying to take over Ukraine's resources, and that makes them, that makes me, who sees things differently. I support imperialism because I support, what Russia's doing in Ukraine. So, I guess fundamentally it's like two different worldviews, two different ways to see things. And if I see, Russia as engaging in resistance to Western imperialist aggression, it's tough to reconcile these two worldviews, and the liberal worldview just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to have any actual basis or foundation. It's just kind of amorphous, and it can always be changed and manipulated to support whatever imperialist agenda, and to kind of just obfuscate and confuse people from really seeing, the material reality. I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I think
you're making a good point, because I think that their lack of understanding of what imperialism is entirely related to how they, throw around the word. They really trivialize the word fascism by throwing it around at everything, because they don't have any real historical understanding of what those things are. I mean, their idea of what imperialism is like you're saying, I guess, just like whenever a country sends troops into another country, regardless of, the fact that Russia has never stated any aims of trying to overthrow Zelensky. I think if they wanted to, they easily could, and would be using a lot more of their military. But regardless of that, their lack of understanding. I mean, when you say things to them like, an example of what imperialism that you could have said is the fact that in 2014, the coup in Ukraine, what set that off, where they overthrew Yanukovych, was that he had, the EU was trying to pull Ukraine into its sphere of influence. Yanukovych had arguably tried to play both sides, but nevertheless, he was presented with a European Union Association Agreement, and that agreement, that economic integration, came with massive austerity measures, which have actually since been ushered in, which is why Ukraine is still the poorest economy in Europe, I believe. But massive privatization of utilities and wage slashing and all that stuff. And he turned it down. He was given a counter offer by Russia, and the whole expansion of NATO and absorbing countries into the EU sphere of influence has been about pulling these former Soviet countries away from Russia, and that's imperialism. it's not just simply a military operation. I mean, if Russia was invading Ukraine and overthrowing Zelensky, they could have an argument, but that's not what's going on here. It's a military. Just because there's a military intervention going on does not mean that. I mean, when the U.S. assassinated or supposedly assassinated bin Laden, I mean, you didn't hear the media talking about how the U.S. invades Pakistan to, I mean, it's just they have no logic or behind their understanding at all. They don't, and that's not even getting into the fact that they have no concept of imperialism as a stage of capitalism. When a capitalist country has reached a certain point where it needs to go out and start seizing colonies and export its capital and seize markets in other countries, and so they can have cheaper labor power and things like that. They have no understanding of what Marxism is. And post-Soviet Russia is a relatively weak capital. It's nowhere near that stage, and it's just I mean, when you consider geopolitically that the United States has something like more than 850 military bases around the world. Russia has, I believe, its only bases abroad are in former Soviet countries. So by saying Russia's imperialist, you're basically calling the Soviet Union imperialist, which doesn't make any sense either. So
I just wanted to go back to briefly discussion around Lenny Bruce, and I would say that the three people that you said who were censored from campuses had more in common, context-wise, philosophically, with the police that murdered Lenny Bruce than they do with the whatever you want to call them, the woke or the liberal audience that denied those people a hearing. And whenever and it's a war, and I don't really agree with all the sentiment, the virtue signaling that goes into some of these movements. But you use whatever fucking tool you have at hand to shut down these people. This whole notion of blanket free speech, that's a joke. It doesn't exist. It's an ideal that never had any efficacy in this country. Never. Not for a nanosecond, and to throw it out because it's on a piece of paper, as though it does, is absurd. It's a war. And if I had to sit down and be with people, I don't want to be with the people who are trying to kill me, like the authorities and the speakers you're talking about, that want to destroy me and want to destroy people I'm very fond of and like. I don't support that. They want to kill me and they want to kill them. They really want to kill them. And I'm not for that. And I'm not going to stop and go, oh, we should let these people speak their minds. They have enough. They have enough forums to speak in. And I want to say that. The other thing I want to say is this notion of imperialism. I don't understand how anyone can think, can take a look at American history, Native Americans, the slavery, and think that this is not an imperialist country, fundamentally. They're even including piracy in their current foreign policy, just stealing stuff on the high seas.
The British Empire was built on piracy.
Francis Drake, he got contracts to do it. Elizabeth just, go out there and steal everything, right, from the Spanish. Yeah, she put you could literally get a contract.
Plundering Spanish treasure ships.
Yeah, exactly. So
liberals are always quick to give.
That brings us to Dugin, because Dugin, he talked about Atlanticism as like control of the seaways and being a sea merchant empire. built on piracy, and that gets into how he views the different continents. I mean, like the difference between landlocked, Eurasianist or the Eurasian heartland and the Atlanticists who conquered through the seaways. I mean, that's an important part of Dugin's work, is how he views the different geopolitical poles.
Well, I understand that. The other thing I wanted to point up is that I kibitz with the people on Breitbart quite a bit. I like to set them up, and you talked about speaking to people you disagree with policy wise. I've slowed down doing it because I'd like to do it with the subject matter being Ukraine, but Breitbart doesn't address Ukraine. It's like it doesn't exist. On a rare occasion, is there anything on Breitbart that has anything to do with Ukraine? I don't think they know how to handle it. But what I find is that those people will take the sentiments that are presented in the three examples you gave of people representing a kind of shadow right, and it will result in shooting people in a Colorado a disco, in a Colorado bar. That's the result, and that's why I think there is certain legitimacy to saying you can say what you want, but you can't say it here. If they're not saying, there's nothing that says you can say anything you want anywhere. If the people, if there are people who don't want it and they want to shut it down, the kids on campus want to shut it down, shut it the fuck down, because it's evil. It's evil and it's dangerous. You gotta stop that. Whatever you have, you've got to get your position out there.
So I agree with Carlo that the liberal idea of free speech is basically a lie. I mean, people don't really.
We don't have to make a bourgeois free speech argument. I mean, this is an issue of strategy, because liberals view, the far left and far right. I mean, that's why they conflate the two together. So I just see any attack on, right-wing media personalities, who I don't really take seriously anyway, when they speak at a university. I'm not defending those people's ideas. What I am saying is that if they take away their right to speak, they're going to inevitably use it to go after people on the far left. They're going to stop someone like a Grover Furr from being able to speak. They're going to stop people like, anybody you want to name. That's why I was against the banning of, stuff like InfoWar. I mean, this is an issue of strategy, because if they ban that stuff, they're going to go after this show.
I'm 74 years old. They've gone after us all our lives. They went after us when you had Hoover and Nixon and MK Ultra and COINTELPRO and all that stuff. And basically in COINTELPRO, they were going after the left. So I know that. That's where it originated, going after the left. We know that. This notion of them actually going after the right, it's bogus. They are the right. They are the same people. They are one and the same. It's like, I didn't want to really get into this, but it brings us to January 6th. This notion that it somehow was an FBI sting. What was an FBI sting? How is that? Does that mean Bannon and Trump were tools of the deep state, so that they knew it was all going to go down this way, and the FBI wanted to go down this way? I don't really.
I mean, the leader of the Proud Boys was an FBI informant.
The
organizers of the whole thing were informants. So
I understand they've always infiltrated. All you have to go, COINTELPRO once again, Martin Luther King once again, Malcolm X once again. Okay, we know all that. We know that. But what I'm saying is that if they were part of it, then they were also on the side of Bannon and Trump, because they wanted that to go down. Now, I have to say there's a certain level where that's absurd. It's absurd. I agree with you. It's absurd. So you have to question this notion. The gentleman you're talking about, I understand that the FBI, who doesn't play fair at all, they're fuckers, they were going to charge him. And he said, okay, so rather than being charged, I'll play ball with you guys. Here are the names. And that's done all the time. I kind of object to this notion of just lying down and letting these powerful forces, all this huge money. Alex Jones, you want to talk Alex Jones? He gave $500,000 to the January 6th.
I think you should be a lot more afraid of the FBI than any of these yokels trying to get into the U.S. Capitol building. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. I agree with that. But I also think that these yokels, whether they were misguided or fooled or tricked or stupid, which they obviously are, they should be prosecuted. I have no problem with that. That's a sidebar for me. And the deep state.
But all they did was they just went inside the building and then left. They didn't do anything.
Sat in the building, and there are laws that they violated. And listen, I live in Washington D.C. I used to go to these fucking demonstrations and film them and tape them all the time, and we were breaking the law all the time. People were arrested. Listen, I worked with CISPAS, and one day we got an call for action, and my camera crew, we went down to the Salvadoran embassy on California Street, and our handler, the person we worked with, what was her name? Something Gas. I can't remember her first name now. She wasn't there. What happened to her? The night before, she'd been at a speech she was giving in Baltimore. She had accepted a ride home from a guy in the crowd, and it turned out to be a stolen car. Well, it was a setup because it was the FBI stolen car, and they kept her restrained overnight.
Yeah.
And then in the morning when her lawyer got there, they dropped all the charges. It was just a harassment and to frighten her. That's the kind of thing they do. And that's the same sort of thing that you're going to get when and if Bannon and Trump or any of these people have their day in court, their day in the spotlight, what they see.
One of the arguments I would make is that it's stirring more trouble against and resisting these kinds of people in the way that we're talking about, like if they're coming to speak at a campus and we stir up a big riot at the campus. Isn't that drawing more attention to their cause and people turning against people? That's how I feel about it.
No, absolutely
no
not.
one would know. No one would care.
Yeah, they get mad more because their tax dollars are being destroyed and the furniture or whatever is being burned. Or I think that's the public is. We have to convince the public in some way.
You're by censoring them. You're validating their ideas.
They're going to make it validated by big money. They already have huge money behind them. They're already the Scaife Foundation, the Koch brothers. One of them's dead now. One of the four is dead now, thank God. And dozens of other foundations. ALEC, for example, that the Koch brothers founded. They're giving money to all these people. That's what gets them. That's what gets them in the spotlight. And believe me, if you don't think ALEC has made great inroads into a kind of fascist state, you're really being naive. Because they
have more about validating their political arguments than validating them by backing them financially. I think because when you say you try to suppress them, they can say we're being persecuted. Give us more space somewhere else.
They're able to successfully portray themselves as anti-establishment. If they're being censored on social media, if they're being banned from speaking at public universities, you're giving them a revolutionary flair that is not there.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're ignoring Breitbart. Go on Breitbart and listen to the arguments people make. The arguments they make are right from the speeches of these people. And those arguments...
They're all the same crowd. It's all the same crowd. They're going to say
it's not the same crowd because you have these people that are able to give speeches. Then you have these people that had no way of articulating themselves. Absolutely none. Until they parroted these assholes. Just do it.
And like
So-
Steve Bannon and all, I mean, he was running Breitbart. So, I mean, all those guys are sort of.
Breitbart and Huffington Post were at one time owned by the same people.
Was it Andrew Breitbart?
And the way they use the platform changes and alters. You know, Huffington Post is wretched too. They're just as wretched as anybody out there. So, I mean, I'm not defending the lies.
Carlo, you made a good
tremendous influence on people, and it's and people are being killed.
So you made a good point, though, that the idea of free speech is not realistic, and our liberal society promotes free speech, and we believe that we engage in free speech, but we really don't. I mean, our speech is entirely regulated. They do it a little bit differently than China regulates it. But China regulates speech in the interests of the vast majority, whereas speech in this country is regulated in the interests of the elite, wealthy minority. So
I fundamentally agree with that we don't conceptually have free speech. But if I were to argue that free speech is really, at least in the public sense, meant for the discussion of ideas, it's a battleground, a marketplace for ideas, rather than including hate speech in that. It's kind of, to me, that just strikes me as asinine. But I mean, that's how people are using it. I mean, I don't know how to combat that without getting in the forefront and getting myself shot at, or something. How do we battle people that are obviously jerks, that want to use free speech as
and that's the thing. Like, we live in a society that we don't control. Like, all the control is in the hands of the wealthy. That's what a capitalist dictatorship is. So in this country, we can't expect free speech. We can't do anything to change, because all the platforms of mass communication are owned by the billionaires. They control what is said and where. So it's like, I'm nonplussed about these Jordan Peterson going to a college and talking. It's like it's virtue signaling. What they're doing is virtue signaling. It's ridiculous. When they shut him down, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. It's just a big virtue signal, which is what liberalism is built on. I mean, right. Who can virtue signal the loudest? They're the ones that win.
But he doesn't go just to colleges that shut him down. He goes to all these right-wing organizations.
Why wouldn't he? I mean, he's not saying anything threatening. He's not saying anything that threatens the establishment.
Notions in their head suddenly can articulate all of their hatred, and they do. Go on Breitbart, check it out. It sound very sophisticated on the surface. And where do they get them from? They got them from these people. And where did those people get them from? They got them from the wealthy. Anonymous people in the thousands of think tanks that are supported by all these like wealthy people you talk about that want to control everything.
But we definitely have a problem in this.
We get back to our.
That's where the fascism is. Capitalism devolves into fascism, as we were saying earlier, and these are kind of the fascist sentiments that are coming out. I think. I mean, that's just the way I see it. It's like, as our society collapses and kind of fragments, there are all these different warring factions that are coming against each other. And we have these guys, these right-wingers that want to be racist as whatever they want to say, racist, transphobic, whatever stuff they want to say. And then you got the other people saying, shut up, we don't want to hear it.
Yeah, but they are not, I mean, a lot, obviously there are real, white nationalist, elements out there. I'm not downplaying that, but a lot of these right-wing media figures is really trivializing the word fascism. I mean, they're not ideologically serious enough. They're not serious enough to be. I mean, are we really going to sit here and compare them to, like, during the Russian Revolution when the Tsar, mobilized the Black Hundreds to like conduct anti-Jewish pogroms? Like, are we really going to compare them historically to something like that? I mean, they are not.
It depends on which one you pick.
I mean, they're not really serious ideologues. They are just sort of. I mean, it's just not addressing the current social moment, current historical moment on its own merits. It's trying to use this like boilerplate of previous historical periods and putting it. I'm not trying to deny that they're not conservative or right wing, or there isn't a flare up of scapegoating of immigrants right now or things like that. I'm just saying that I think it's a little bit, I mean, we can't compare them to like the Free Corps or, it's just not, it's not applicable. I mean, even what happened in Charlottesville, I mean, this is a couple hundred people. This is not a significant, this is a media spectacle. This is not a big enough, I just don't see it, especially when you have the same people sounding the alarm about this resurgence of fascism, have no problem sending billions of dollars to the Azov battalion and a country like Ukraine, which are tearing down World War II memorials, and there's a real resurgence of fascism. I just don't buy it. So a lot of the crying wolf, as far as I'm concerned, about this resurgence of fascism, or that like January 6th was like some kind of serious fascist coup. I mean, the idea that they could have seized power is just so beyond laughable to me. I just don't even, I mean, they were allowed in there. They were clearly allowed in there by the police.
Well,
I think the whole thing was directed by the FBI.
That's not true. That's not true.
It's always a great discussion when we get Carlo a little worked up. We don't want him too worked up.
Let me just say, yes, I agree. It was laughable that they were going to overthrow. I mean, they were going to get what they wanted.
They're disorganized. There's too many.
Once they got in there, they left. They didn't do anything.
But the thing is, look at that. You saw the tape. There were police pushing against the barricades, and they were pushing police, and they were.
But there were also police and in the crowd that were.
Well, I know that there are. Listen, my wife is constantly pointing out the number of right-wing Christians in the military, and she goes, that's what they always say: if you gain control of the military, then you can have the coup. And she constantly pointing that out to me, and I kind of poo-poo that. But there was just tape of the Capitol Police.
I mean, you live in DC, right? You said you live in DC.
Yes.
I mean, if you go smoke a joint a couple blocks away from the White House, you're probably going to get swarmed by police. I mean, the idea that they were just.
I think marijuana is legal in Washington now, and it's legal in Maryland now too.
Okay, well,
I'm just over the line in Maryland. It's all legal.
Okay, well, my point is that that's got to be like one of the most heavily surveilled and policed areas in the country. I just don't buy that they were able to get into that building without being allowed in, or that there was. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, that's the point. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, isn't that the point? Isn't that what Bannon wanted?
I was talked to Camus about absurdism. Nothing makes sense. Nothing has meaning.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us back to Dugin, because according to Dugin, we live in a postmodernism has even vanquished liberalism of his meaning. We live in a post-liberal world.
Post-truth.
According to Dugin.
Max, happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate you coming on. And like I said, it was a lively discussion. Whenever we get into domestic political issues, there's strong opinions.
Yes, so, no, I'm happy to do it again anytime. It was great to talk to you and Carlo.
Exciting. Well, thanks for joining us, Max, and thanks Carlo and Billy Bob for throwing in your 2 cents, and Carlo for your 4 cents. Wonderful discussion. I think we had a really provoking set of ideas going around. So you've been watching the Foreign Policy Review. Please subscribe to our channel and watch some of our other shows. We have Post-Colonial Poetry tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you want to take a look at that, that'll be an excellent way to learn a little bit about apartheid and some other wonderful affairs of history, if you want to call them wonderful. I just did. But hey, anyway, join us at 7 a.m. Central Time. Also, there's the Bronx Politics, and this has been a wonderful talk with Max Parry and all you guys. Always is wonderful, usual discussion. So thanks for watching, and have an excellent afternoon. Get to watching some other stuff.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted, and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions. It is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence,